one thing I love to teach when we start Photoshop is just the basic tools. For example, we talked just a minute ago about, so this is the move tool, right? The shortcut is V. This is the marquee tool. Like I told you, all the marquee is pretty much click and drag, or go with the ellipse tool and say click and drag, and you'll see, click and drag, and you'll see that it creates basically a little bit of this kind of shape that is marching ants, though. It's not yet truly an object. It's just in potential an object. You're selecting part of your screen. Now I want to show you something handy. When you create your selection, you have these options at the top. And if you don't have them, go in Workspace Essential Classics. So Workspace and choose, Essential in this case. Essential Classic is in Photoshop, sorry. Or you could say reset it. Essentials, or any of these will give you this, basically top menu up here. So what this top menu is, it gives you the options related to the tools you're using. So in the case of selection, you can decide, I'm going to do Command D. Oh, that's the one that I wanted to write on the board. Command D is for deselect. If you say, okay, I want a new selection, this is new selection, this is add to the selection, this is intersect and subtract and intersect. So if I say I want a new selection right now, boom, and then I say, oh, I want to add to the selection another circle, there we are, and then I want to subtract a little square, oops. When you switch shape, it goes back to add. Don't ask me why. It's a little glitch, but so there we are. So now if I do now on a new layer, Option Delete, as you can see, is filling that whole shape. Yes?
Sorry, I'm not getting like the marching ants sort of ellipse. I'm only getting the regular one. Could you repeat again how to?
Yeah. So you have, let me do Command Z and Command D. So you have different shapes here. I know what you're using. If you're using something down here, rectangle tool, ellipse tool, these are actually vector tools. And you don't want to use those yet. But if you go up here, the marquee tool, M is your shortcut, and the most common is a rectangular marquee. So if you go on the marquee and then you click on New Selection and click and drag, are you getting that, this or no?
Sorry, I forgot my glasses, so I'm like trying to see. I could talk to you later.
Okay, yeah, but can you get a marquee? Because it should be really. I'm just checking if I have another pair of glasses, that sometimes I do. And they're probably completely different, but you never know. I mean, if somehow, try. If one of these two works, I'm fine. These are actually generic glasses. So anyway, so the marquee tool, and try the other one. They're completely different. One is a Costco pair, this is a real.
Because my issue is I can't see far.
Oh no, my problem is the opposite. Yeah. Not gonna work. All right, so now I want to also show you something. When you go into the marquee and click and drag, it looks like this marquee should have 90 degrees corner. But you notice that when we make that shape is rounded. You know why? Because I have 10 pixels in the feather. Feather is when, and you remember that when I created a fill in here, when I did Option Delete, do you see how it's all blurry at the edges? That's a feather. That means when you want to create this kind of like soft effect, like this, you want to add pixel in the feather. Now, if I actually say that I want the feather to be 0, and I hit return, and I do the same thing, you see that now it's not rounding anything, and when I do Option Delete, it's actually a solid, there's no fuzziness all around it, right? So remember that if it ever happens to you that you see something like that, you say, wait, what happened? I don't want this, is because you likely have the feathers in the option. Most of the problem we run into in Photoshop have to do with the options at the top. All right, so what I wanted to show you was, first and foremost, that you have options at the top, that for the selection you can add, subtract, intersect, and the reason why is because in a minute we're going to do a wrench, and you remember how the wrench is done, is a circle with a rectangular notch at the top, and then a little rectangle for the stem, and then another circle at the bottom. That's kind of the shape of a wrench. So we're going to use these tools, exactly, selections and fills and stuff, to create this wrench, and then we'll make it three-dimensional. What else can you do with, in terms of selection? This is called the polygonal lasso. What the polygonal lasso allows you to do is, let's say you don't want to do rectangle and circles or ellipses. By the way, if you want to do a perfect circle, just like in Illustrator, you want to click and drag and then hold Shift. And if you want it to start from the center, you want to add Option to it. And you can see life is good. The same stuff you learned in Illustrator applies in Photoshop. Now, the polygonal lasso allows you to do shapes that are completely away from rectangles and circles. They are whatever you want them to be. There we are. So the polygonal lasso is really handy for that, but it's also handy for selecting things. Like if we go in the polygonal lasso right now and choose magnetic lasso, it will be really, really helpful. First of all, what is the difference between polygonal lasso and lasso tool? Polygonal lasso is all straight lines versus the lasso tool, you click and drag and just creates whatever blob you drag around. So they're likely different. You know, I want to show you though something that I'm going to go in Google, and I want you to follow me, and type rubber duck. And go into images and find a good rubber duck with a high contrast with the background, right? So for example, this one has a little bit of a shadow, is a little lower contrast, but in general is pretty good. Let me see if I find another one. This one is good. So if I go in here, and then I go on the side and I right mouse click or control click and say save image as, and I call it duck. Oh, no, it was an AVI, it wasn't a, unfortunately, sorry. I just noticed that it was not a JPEG. Let me see. Save image as. Let's see if it's a JPEG. Yeah, this is a JPEG. So I'm going to save this one too, just in case the first one didn't fly, didn't turn out to be what I wanted to be. I call it duck 1. Perfect. So right now, if I go in Photoshop and I do File Open and I choose duck, yeah, you see that. Let's see if it still opens it. Is a weird extension. Oh, it's the raw. Sorry. No, we don't want raw. I want to scare you at the beginning of Photoshop, please. Let me close. Oh gosh. Why is not? Sorry. For some reason it was stuck. It was giving me trouble. Okay, let me File Open, and open the second one. Is duck 1. We don't need the camera raw. That is something that we are not using anyway. Okay, we're in this class. All right, it's not a photography class. If you do want to learn all about camera raw, there is I think Art 122 or 126 that does that. So if I wanted to select it with the regular lasso right here, it would be really painful, right? I mean, there's no way I can select this duck with a regular lasso. But if I go with the polygonal lasso, I have a better chance, but not the greatest chance. Why is not? Because the polygonal lasso, sorry, I think I did not select the polygonal right here. If I go and do click, 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 I can eventually select it, but the polygonal lasso is going to do mainly straight line. That is not ideal when you have a round shape. So your best bet is to use this beautiful thing called magnetic lasso. Magnetic lasso looks at the difference in color, the different hue and saturation. So if you click here and then you follow that edge, it will create that line of selection for you. So that's the polygonal lasso, sorry, the magnetic lasso for you. So the regular lasso is free form, polygonal lasso is all a straight line, and then you have this magnetic lasso that, boom, now I got the duck selected. You see that, right? But there's even a faster way to get the duck selected. I told you that the magnetic lasso works based on the difference in color. The magic wand does the same thing. So if you go down here, you have the quick, they call it object selection tool, the quick selection tool, and the magic wand tool. Let's go with the quick selection tool. The quick selection tool, just like the magnetic lasso, allows you to select the color and click and drag. And the more you drag, the more of that color will include. I'm going all around the screen. And you can see I got the same result, except right now I have selected not the duck, but the background, and I can always go and say select inverse, and now I got the duck. Another way to go is to use the instead magic wand. Magic wand is actually the fastest, because the magic wand, you can just click on one color, and as long as you have contiguous unchecked, it will take that color all over the screen. So if I click on here, everything white will get selected. One click. And then I can do select inverse, and I got the duck. So as you can see, these are all good selection tools, but they all have a purpose. So to select this duck, the fastest one is the magic wand. The quick selection tool right after with the magnetic lasso. But what I told you we would do today is we were going to create a wrench. So if I go in here, abandon my duck, and I had created this file, file new. What I want you to do actually is create a specific measure file. So I want you to go in File New and type 600 by 600. So we're doing the wrench on a file that is 600 by 600 pixels. 72 in resolution is fine because we don't need to print it. RGB is great because we talked about color spaces and we said RGB is a little bit broader than CMYK, so we have more colors. If you go down here, it talks about color profiles. We mentioned color management in this class and how you want all your files to always have a color profile. But for the sake of today, let's say create and not worry about it because we're just learning Photoshop today. So I have this artboard right now, and I have my rulers. What I want you to do to create the wrench, we're going to have a little bit of a precise approach. I want you to have I want you to be right in the middle, put a guide right in the middle of the screen in the vertical side. So I want you to control click on your ruler and choose pixels. Because we did 600 by 600, so we know that right here at 300 is the middle. So I'm going to grab from the left side ruler, everybody look up, the left side ruler, and drag it out and let it go at 300. So now I divided the screen vertically right in the middle, right? Everybody with me so far?
I don't have a ruler on my thing, and I keep resetting the window to essentials like default and all the other ones, but I still don't have like access to the ruler at the top.
The ruler, Command R.
Okay.
You don't have access because you have to call it. It doesn't come by default.
Okay.
No worries. So Command R gets you in and out of the rulers. You can see that, right? Every time I do Command R, the rulers come in or come out.
Yeah, how do you create the guideline?
You don't create it. You click and drag it out.
Okay.
I mean, you create it they're already kind of there. You just click and drag them out.
I see.
Means you don't need a tool that says create anything. It just comes natural. So I also want you in the 600 in the other direction. I want you to go to 150, or let's say 200 and 400. So here's we're going to put the head of the wrench, the stem, and the bottom of the wrench. So we're going to create a wrench together right now. Then I'll show you how to make it 3D and how to use the marquees, colors, gradients, lasso tools, all that stuff. So it's a pretty cool exercise. If somehow you are behind, you've got to raise your hand so I can come and help. So we start by, if you remember the shape of a wrench, Sage, are you good?
Yeah, can you do that to get the lines again?
You just click in here and drag it out. I don't want to do it again because then I have an extra line that, yes.
For me, it's like I'm dragging it, but it's not always like placing it. Like it doesn't always stay. Like I'm putting it like here, I drag it, and then it just disappears.
Do you have the rulers out? And you're dragging it from the rulers?
I believe so. I have the little ruler over here. If that's what you're talking about. Hey, work.
So if you want to go, first of all, you have a nice stem. You see the zero is all the way down here. You grab this and set your zero back here. And then you go here, so we're on at 200. So yeah, I don't know why it would disappear. If you just click and drag and let go at the right time, it's going to be there. All right, everybody with me so far? Sage, did you have a question? Are you good?
Yeah, mine's not like dragging down. It's just like putting the box.
You need to click, hold, get to a point, and release.
Okay, got you. Thank you.
Is it good? Okay. I think I did not say that. It's my fault. I apologize. You need to hold it. You need to click on the ruler, hold it when you get to where you want to release. All right. So now I want to go in the yes.
I'm only getting horizontal lines. For some reason, but I didn't do a vertical one.
You need to grab it from here and drag in this direction. Do the same thing but from the vertical ruler. All right, so now I'm going to grab the circle. I want to make sure I start with the new selection. So make sure up here, be very careful what happens in these 4 options. You want to make sure you're in new selection. And you want to go and click in the middle between your guides, drag, hold option, and hold shift. So it grows from the center and is a perfect circle. And then let go, mouse first, keys after. So right now you just have a cute little marquee. You don't have any content really. As you can see in the layers, when you see little checker, gray and white checker means it's transparent. There's nothing there. So now what I need to do is I need to add the stem here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch first to rectangular, go into add to the selection, because if you don't, you're going to lose the first selection. And then click at the very bottom up until you get something that looks like a stem for your wrench and let go. You can see your mouse has a little plus sign. That means you're adding to the selection. Now, wrenches have a little tinier, smaller little circle at the bottom with a half moon shaped hole. So what we need to do is switch to the elliptical marquee again. Make sure we are again in add because it went back to new selection. You want to make sure you're still in add. So when you go in there, your mouse has a little plus sign. And again, you click here in the intersection, drag, add option and shift and let go. Now what I need to do is a little hole down here. So I'm staying in the circular marquee, but this time I'm going to say I want to subtract. So I'm moving to the 3rd button. I'm going to zoom in, Command plus, to see what I'm doing down here. And I'm going to click and drag, again, Option and Shift, and then let go. Now, this top part I need to actually fill in because I told you there is a half moon shaped hole there, not an entire hole. So at this point, you want to switch to a rectangular marquee. Switch to, again, make sure you're adding this time. If you were in subtract, shift to add. And then click and drag just a rectangle and boom. And now you remove the top part of the little circle. So we're getting better, but one thing that the wrench has here is a rectangular notch. And notch means I need to subtract again, right? So I'm going to switch into subtract right here. I'm going to click and drag. Boom. So now I got the shape of my wrench. I have all the pieces. So it's a bit of a juggling act of switching between circle and rectangles, and every time making sure you have the appropriate new selection, add or subtract. Also make sure your feather is a 0, like I told you earlier, because you don't want any fuzziness around. And now what you really have is just a part of your screen is selected in the shape of a wrench. You still don't have a wrench. You understand that, right? Is everybody aware that we don't have a wrench? We don't have an object. It's still all white. But we do have enough that we need to save it. So how do you save selections? So in Photoshop, you have something called channels right here. And I'm going to dock it with the layers. So you can see there's nothing. There's no content whatsoever right there. But when I go in select, save selection right here, that is, by the way, also this button down here, but let's do it through the menu. That is easier at first, or at least looks easier. And I'm going to call it wrench. And you see my option is new channel. Look what happened up here, okay, in the channel palette. It's basically taking a black and white image to explain what is included in the selection and what is not. And that is great because it shows you right away, right here, when I activate this, that black in Photoshop also means not selected, versus white, it means included in the selection, selected. Now, this idea of the black and white that is, selected, not selected, will come back over and over again. We'll find it when we talk about masks. We'll find it when we talk about, many, many things in Photoshop. But at the moment, what I really should do is switch back to layers and make sure I have a layer that I can put some color. So what I suggest you do is you go and pick 2 colors you like. I have red and white, but I'm going to actually take 2 shades of blue because I know that, double click in here, I know that like a gray and a blue would be fine to create, or more like maybe a light blue and darker blue, to create kind of more like a metallic effect. Boom. Now I want you to grab now that you have these 2 blues in the options of your colors down here, and for whoever doesn't see it, I'm sorry, that gets highlighted, is the dock hides it, but down here there is the background and foreground color right here. So I would like you to select 2 colors, then go into the gradient tool. And we're going to create a gradient. Create a new layer, by the way, layer 2, and call it wrench. Right here. So how does the gradient work in Photoshop? You click and drag outside of your selection. In my case, I'm gonna click and drag on a diagonal so that it creates like this diagonal shape. And strangely enough, even though I chose 2 shades of blue, somehow the default here is this kind of weird pinkish color, the presets. So I can actually go and choose a preset like this, something that, again, has blues in it. Actually, this is pretty good. Yeah, I like this one. Or you can double click, obviously, and choose the color you want. You can say, oh, I want this, or, I want that. My point is, you can also double click, just like we did in Illustrator, in which we would kind of go onto what I call the paint buckets. There were these look just like this, like big dots. The old days looked like actually paint buckets. And you can kind of set the colors you want. All right, now that you have your wrench, what I want to show you, and now notice what happened here. That's another thing that I want to show you that is really interesting. That is why I did it. So by default, what it did is it created a gradient, and attached to the gradient, there is this image, we call that a mask, that says, I want to mask everything except what is in white. That is the shape of the wrench. Another way to do it is you can go and go in select, load selection, choose wrench and say OK. And now I'm going to actually hide this layer, create a new one, and show that you could actually decide, for example, to do Option Delete with just a solid color. And you can see that there is a dramatic difference between what we did with the gradient, in which what it did, the thumbnail shows you that it flooded the entire screen with a gradient first. And then because of this mask effect of black and white, it basically determined that because what is white is the wrench shape, the color should be only seen in that area. But I also want to show you that there are other ways to fill, that like we did earlier with the ellipse, in which you don't need a mask. The gradient works more with the mask, but you don't have to. But for the sake of today, what I'm going to do right now is make sure I have this wrench selected. I'm going to take layer 2 and hide it. And I'm going to actually, in fact, maybe delete it to keep it simple. On top of layer 1, I'm going to create a new layer. And I'm going to call it wrench shadow. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my marquee tool, the M tool right here, the one right below the selection, and I'm going to go inside my shape. And when I go inside my shape, my cursor changes into a white arrow that says, hey, if you click and drag, you can move me. So I moved this wrench. And what I want this one to be is a shadow. So I'm going to go and grab a darker gray or darker color or darker blue, whatever you want. And if I do Option Delete there, you can see that almost looks like this. I say shadow, but it could also be the 3D part of the wrench. Obviously, if I made it more blurry, it'll look like a shadow, but it's the 3D part of the wrench, what makes the wrench look 3D. Now, does anybody see any problem with this, though, if I deselect what's going on? If this was a 3D wrench, would it have these notches, these white notches cut into it? No. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and load again. By the way, instead of loading the wrench through select, load, selection, another way to do it is to go and find a black and white image of that wrench and command click on that thumbnail, and it will load the selection. So you can always command click on any layer thumbnail and it will load the selection around the object that is in the layer. So what I need to do now to get it right is I need to zoom in here and I need to fill these areas. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the magnetic, actually the polygonal lasso, sorry. I was saying magnetic, but I was thinking polygonal. And I'm going to actually, wait, I made a mistake. I wanted to select this wrench, not this one. Haha. Let me do this. So you need to click, command click on actually the wrench shadows. This is the one I want to fill, so that I can fill these areas with the same color. Then I go in the polygonal lasso, and I'm going to make sure that I'm on add to the selection. You want to be on add to the selection, otherwise it's going to lose the selection if you don't switch to add. And I'm going to just create two little triangle to fill these areas. And then make sure I am in that wrench shadow. I called this shadow, but what I meant was a three-dimensional part. I don't know how else to call it. Maybe 3D. I'll rename it 3D later. And again, I want to make sure I'm in the, this new selection option, and I do Option Delete. That fills whatever you have on the screen in a marching ant format. So now if I deselect Command D, you can see that this looks like a beautiful wrench. If I do Command semicolon, the semicolon I think is the comma with the dot on top. I always confuse that one with the two dots. But if I do Command semicolon, also get rid of the guides. If I do Command semicolon, brings them back, right? So that toggles the guides, just like Command R toggles the rulers. Command 0 shapes, fill the screen, my basically document with the art I made. So that's kind of how you create a wrench. The other part, and then I'm going to give you lab time to do it yourself, because I know some of you are just following by watching and some are doing. If you wanted to give it a color, you would want to go into layers, and you would want to do Command A that selects the entire screen. You can see that, marching ants all around. And then you can go and find some fun, joyous color, like a bright orange or something you really like. And then you can do Option Delete. Make sure you're on a separate layer, layer 1. Option Delete. It's a little too much. You can barely see the wrench. So let me get a little bit more like an apricot color. That seems like likely to allow the wrench to stand out more. My big problem is I'm a booger about colors, and I don't like the apricot. Maybe blue, who knows. But another thing I want to show you in the same lecture is the last of it, so hold tight and then we're done. What if I want to select these two and rotate them together? So I need to select one, shift click the other, click on this little link option at the bottom, and it should show a little box that it doesn't right now. I don't know why. There we are. Okay, now I do Command T. There is a little box, and I can rotate it. Let's say with the Shift key, it'll rotate 45 degrees. I hit Return, And then I'm going to move it to the side and type wrench right here. And then I'm going to do a 3D effect on the text, but with a different technique. So I'm going to type wrench, and it's obviously doing it blue on blue, so you can now see it. I'm going to make it Arial black. It's nice and bulky. I'm going to make it that bright orange I liked. And I'm going to make it big. Instead of 50, I'm going to make it 150. Maybe 150 is too much. Let's go with 120. Still too big. Let's do 90. So obviously it's cut out, so you want to take this and make it bigger. So what if I want to create a 3D effect on this piece of text? Well, I just showed you how to create a 3D effect on the wrench object. But if you double click on the wrench text, on the empty space, you'll see this thing called layer style, in which you can say, you know, I kind of want to give it a drop shadow. I want to give it a, and you can actually click on this drop shadow and specify how big the drop shadow, which color, and da-da. But you can also say, I want to give it a bevel and emboss to it, and you can choose how much bevel and emboss. Like you want the size to be bigger. You can see it can get a little bit bigger or smaller. You want it a little bit softer or harsher right there. You can see that. You can specify all the basic quality of this, both the drop shadow, and you can do an outer glow, an inner glow. You can give it a little stroke. You can see that. I don't like it particularly, and can choose the color of the stroke. Maybe if we go with a darker orange, it's going to be a little bit more bearable. You get the picture, right? You can assign these things called layer styles. By the way, they're all here and they're live. You can decide that you don't want it. You can turn it off at a little, you know, in a second. But I wanted to show you how you create a wrench that looks three-dimensional, and how you can add text and create a similar effects, makes it that type look more 3D by using something called layer styles instead of doing it by hand as we did with the wrench. I'm going to stop the recording and then come around and help you for anybody that got lost.